I don't really talk about too much personal stuff here on the channel, and why would I? I mean, who cares? But the weird thing about my past is that I can pinpoint events based on what movies were out at the time, whether I was going to see them in the theater or going to the local mom and pop shops and whatnot. What's the first movie I ever saw at a theater? Now, I don't remember. I can't pinpoint the first one, but what I can pinpoint is the first movie I called my favorite via these mom and pop video stores. Kind of what would be my very first favorite movie, if you will. Through the years, I kind of found that I relate a lot to movies like this, maybe because I was a child of divorce or whatever, and not really liking my stepdad, like, at all. I guess you can say that's why I like these flicks, I don't know. But, Radio Flyer, I actually saw that years before any family turmoil. And I remember renting it all the time. In fact, I remember my family specifically saying that I had finally rented a good movie. Rightfully so. I was also into other, movies like this, like Fox and the Hound, Land Before Time, even Lucas. Movies that I knew carried more weight than I was able to lift at the time. Radio Flyer is a very unique case, though. Like, there's weird tones kind of clashing at times, and a lot of it is very real feeling, albeit with a heavy dose of fantasy, making this a very palatable film when I was a child, one that I kind of see reveals a lot more when you watch it with adult eyes. Now, I guess the film isn't perfect, even though I consider it to be so, but more on that later. It may be in Radio Flyer where I first learned to appreciate things like cinematography, storytelling, acting, casting, how important geography is in a film, all these things I will learn to appreciate later in life were all lessons learned from a film that tells a story about two brothers growing up with a single mother who marries an abusive man who decides to take out his drunken rage on the youngest child, Bobby. Here, Bobby is played in jaw-dropping form by a young Joseph Mazzello, and ultimately the film kind of tells the story on how he escapes it all with some help from his older brother Mike, played by Elijah Wood. And through the storytelling, he sometimes lets the harshness be as blunt as possible, and other times he seems to hide it with the more fantastic elements of the story, really making for an interesting fantasy take on it. Like, obviously he's omitting details to shield his children at times, stuff like that. And as a result, I've always kind of looked at this flick as one of those unreliable narratives, where the film is definitely told through a perspective, through years of memories, through many tinted colors of glasses, if you will. Or you can take the film literally, which I think is kind of a detriment, as that somehow kind of requires even more imagination. I'll explain later, but to understand Radio Flyer and the sadness behind the film and on screen, you really have to understand how the film came into fruition in the first place. The film was written by David Mickey Evans, who we all know from writing The Sandlot, and some other movies that we won't mention today. But before striking it big, Evans, well, he was just a college kid that was trying to write some scripts and get them sold, you know what I mean? And in those days, it was basically the heyday of the straight-to-video rental shelves just being full of schlock. So, his first writing credits were indeed the cult slasher Open House and the teen comedy Terminal Entry.
The computer. Some people think it's a high-tech toy, but this is no toy.
He would even get a special thanks on the underrated class of 1999. Strange. Clearly, David Mickey Evans was a fan of sci-fi and, horror and genre, I suppose. And ironically, it would be upon meeting one of his heroes, Ray Bradbury, where he would learn an important lesson from the man himself. Write what you know, is what Bradbury told him, and with that, Evans decided to take a more personal approach to his next script, and indeed included himself in it in a way. That script would eventually become known as Radio Flyer. David Mickey Evans' original script was actually way more heavy-handed and hot shit around Hollywood. Like, it caused a bidding war between Michael Douglas's company, Stonebridge, Of course, along with Columbia Pictures. They were bidding pretty heavily against Warner Brothers at the time. Warner Brothers, who was seeking it for Richard Donner. Richard Donner, R.I.P. But it being Evans' original script, well, he had some leverage. And he made a deal that not only netted him $1 million price tag for his script, but also first-time directing duties. And with that, the film went into production under Columbia, being among the first films greenlit after the purchase of Sony. So after a sordid career at that point, he found himself on the path to Hollywood glory. What could go wrong?
Remember when you couldn't drive, but you could fly?
David Mickey Evans would seem to get the cast he wanted, including actors like Luke Edwards, who was most well known for the film The Wizard. And soon production would start. As far as I could tell, the film went into production with the original script. Granted, I'm sure there were a few changes. But the original script involved a lot more fantasy elements, and ironically, a lot more real-life drama elements, too. But, either due to the casting or to Evans' stylistic choices, after just a few weeks of dailies, the studio got cold feet. With $1 million spent on the script, and a budget at about $15 million, things were getting crucial, as they were about $8 million deep in a hole, as all the footage shot was basically useless and put them in a tight spot. The studio quickly replaced Evans with none other than Richard Donner, who I'm sure got paid a pretty goddamn penny. And with that, the little modest budget drama that could was ballooning. That included extensive rewrites to Evans' script, but hey, David Mickey Evans took it all in stride. And I mean, who better at the time to take over than Richard Donner, seriously. Go! Another big addition to Radio Flyer was film star Cody the Buffalo, whose scenes, man, they lend to some of the film's most emotional moments. Fun fact, my cousin Victor actually grew up in the small town in California that they shot this out in the mountains or whatever. And from what he told me, they did like a casting call for young extras and whatnot. And they even built some sets that they didn't even use. They just kind of left them up. I think like one was a post office or something. And, I remember him saying like, yeah, I saw them shooting, I saw them around town. Funny thing is, my cousin looks a lot like Thomas Ian Nicholas. You know him from Rookie of the Year and so on and so forth.
Funky butt loving. Did he say funky butt loving?
Well, his very first movie was Radio Flyer. He's one of the little dipshit kids. I always tell my cousin, you could have been Thomas Ian Nicholas. So with the new script in place, the film we all know and love went into production. And even though with the cast changes, the script changes, hell, even a director change, the film went on to be a box office flop.
Funky butt loving.
In fact, in the box office, it came in number 20, just behind Free Jack. And it didn't seem to be a give or take situation. I mean, audiences and critics alike really didn't get this movie. I can't help but wonder, like, what other stuff was included in the original script. I'm sure there's a lot more fantastical elements and maybe even some more child abuse stuff. David Mickey Evans went on to write a book that was kind of an adaptation of his original script. It's in the mail. I'll let you know what's different. I can see where these arguments come from, but as I stated, I do think it's a near-perfect film for what it is. And growing up with it, I always knew there was more to it, but I enjoyed it all the same. It really tempts that part of your brain as a kid, and is instantly relatable. I think for those of you lucky enough to not grow up with divorce and such, a lot of the more severe elements may seem kind of like a basic villain setup, viewed with kids' eyes at least. But as an adult, it has a much more weighted reality. When discussing the sadness of Radio Flyer, I think it hits early on, in the very first scene, in fact. Something in adult Mike's eyes hits so hard with hints of grief and longing. Maybe that's why they hired Tom Hanks for this bit part, as Tom Hanks can act solely with his eyes with the best of them. But watching it now as an adult, it seems so obvious that the adult version of Mike is shielding the truth from his children. At the very least, he's veiling it, And it kind of seems to be reminiscing about his long-gone brother, all on his own. Now I have to say that I am, of course, an Elijah Wood fan, especially these days. And I guess I always have been. But watching his kid roles now, it all seems a little goofy. Like, he never really acted like a child, but more like a little man, you know, like a little adult. And here, I think, is the closest we got to him being an actual kid in Radio Flyer. And we see the obvious talent in both he and Mazzello. And with the chemistry between them as brothers, and with the addition of Lorraine Bracco, we really get that family feel. Like, it really feels genuine. As does the struggle of the mother here, again played by Lorraine Bracco, as she is up and down trying to figure out the best life for her and her kids. And you really just feel her pain and her struggle. Early on, we get a scene where the family is driving across the desert and they stop off at an Old West show to see Buffalo. And, you know, you kind of get the hint that they're pretty low on funds and the mom's just trying to entertain them. And again, you get that real family vibe here. Like, that seems so real. And it's there where they realize that the adventurous little desert stop, it's a pretty sad place. I mean, they are on their way to what they see as a brand new magical beginning, you know? And here, on their stop in the desert, they see the desolate yet supposedly adventurous roadside attraction kind of acting as a melancholy foreshadowing of what's to come.
Why is this happening to Bobby and not to me?
Because Bobby cannot fight back.
Oh, and for anybody who has a brother, this movie will tug at your heartstrings for sure. Oftentimes the film can feel like two different movies, which I feel works, as it kind of is. We get glimpses of what the adults are dealing with, but through kids' eyes. And sometimes it doesn't really make sense, as it shouldn't. And the rest of the movie we see interpreted through basically young Mike's eyes, feeling absolutely helpless and just out of control. All told, again, through our shielding, unreliable narrator, making for a one-of-a-kind film, in my opinion. Perhaps one of the strangest uses of fantasy in the film is when the boys' trusty companion Shane, their dog, is getting beat up by the king while they're at school, and the boys know something is up and they run home. And the whole sequence is one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever witnessed on film, really making you hate the king character, here played by Adam Baldwin, a type of character he vowed to never play again, as it took its toll. I wish critics and audiences would give this one another shot. I mean, yeah, tones and stuff are clashing. We literally go from a scene like this,
God damn it, Bob!
to this.
Sorry.
It's scenes like this that really make this one a one-of-a-kind movie dealing with these issues. But all done with a childlike gaze that we've long since forgotten. Now, if you ask me, young Bobby did not make it and met his end at the hands of the king. Now, that's just my somber way of looking at it, you know, and him being at the airfield with his kids, like, that's where he goes to think about his brother and imagine this version of reality where he was able to successfully defend him and help him fly away, you know what I mean? That's the way I think the movie kind of pans out, with seeing it with older eyes. But again, with the original script, we did get a different scene. We got a different book in there with an older Tom Hanks taking his kids to a museum where we actually see the machine they built, the radio flying machine or whatever, right next to the Wright brothers' very first prototype. And fun little fact here, the young brothers, their last name turns out to be Wright. There's really no question, though, as to what really happened, not if you pay a little attention. You see, in the end of the film, just after Mike tells the story of Bobby kind of traveling the world, you know, and writing them letters all the while, well, he makes it a point to say this to his kids.
Do you guys understand what I meant about history being in the mind of the teller now?
I think so. Yeah.
Good. Good. Because that's how I remember it.
He's letting it basically be known here that this is how he perceives everything now. Also, when Bobby took off on his flight, he had mighty Samson the Turtle with him. And we learned that in reality, Mike still has Samson, as we see his kids ask,
Is that where we got Samson?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly where we got it.
In my opinion, It's pretty clear that Bobby didn't make it. However, I don't think he crashed in a makeshift flying machine. I think he met his end from the king. And the whole ending is just a grown man telling a fantasy story about his long-lost brother. You know, a version of life where he was able to defend him. A story that he's had years and years to get just right. Everybody involved would go on to greatness, of course, and David Mickey Evans would basically spearhead the 90s kid baseball film trope, one of which stars the original casting choice for young Bobby. And ironically, Thomas Ian Nicholas was in a few of these 90s kid sports movies himself. I mean, y'all remember this one, right? And Steven Spielberg, who was friends with Donner, visited the set multiple times, as he did previously with Goonies. Only this time, he noticed the young Joseph Mazzello, and cast him later on in Jurassic Park. Which also kind of started a weird 90s trope. Well, it got weird anyways. And any flaws or blemishes from the film's performance would be forgiven. And while David Mickey Evans would go on to have a successful career and have a few classics under his belt, I really commend him for having the guts to write a script like this. And think about it, I mean, to have major studios bid over a script as original as Radio Flyer? Well, the good old days sure are behind us, aren't they? Thanks for watching, Staunch Gang. I'm going to be doing more videos like this where I kind of focus in on sadder movies that have stuck with me through my lifetime. So if you have anything that you want to recommend for our new series, The Sadness Of, let me know down in the comments. Please like and share. Make sure you subscribe to all of that shit. And we have t-shirts for $10 only, guys. Hit me up in the comments. Link in description. Hit me up on my Cash App. Whatever. Rep your boy Staunch TV. Thanks for watching. My cousin Victor also told me that there was a scene where there was like fire engines spraying water to imitate rain. I couldn't find it in the film. Maybe y'all can. Let me know. And that the main house in the film, as well as the shack behind it and the police station, were all just sets built for the movie. He also told me that they were put up in pretty spiffy hotels during the filming. And also, as I said earlier, the police station set that was built for the movie, well, it was just kind of left abandoned. And my cousins and his friends kind of took over. It was their own little private playhouse, compliments of Columbia. And my cousin also told me that when filming wrapped, an ultimate block party was thrown. Again, compliments of Columbia Pictures.